I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey guys, good to see you. It's really strange. I was conscious of the video, starting, but I was editing a video. I was kind of in the desert. I was somewhere else for about the last hour, but I really didn't realize that I'd scheduled it for 2 a.m. my time instead of 1 a.m. my time. But anyway, here I am. Thank you very much to those of you who stuck around. We are going to look at the closing arguments of the state, the verdict, and then we're also going to look at the crazy testimony of the so-called gun expert, which I really think kind of shot the defense case in the foot. I mean, I don't think anyone could have done a better job at making the point than that particular witness. So we're going to look at that. Good to see everyone here. Stephanie, good to see you. You've been away for a while. I believe your son's participating in all sorts of contests. So anyway, good to see you guys. Diane, thanks Terry for letting me know. But anyway, yeah, we are, and so we are going to start with the cross-examination. So let's go straight to that. Sound okay? Sound quality fine? Now, before she starts, what is quite interesting for me to see was, because I actually did watch some of it from wherever I was. I think I was watching it on Law and Crime, and the Law and Crime mod said this is the district attorney giving closing arguments, Mary Altwise something, and of course it's Carrie Morrissey, right? And so it was kind of just interesting that at the end of the trial, someone didn't really know the prosecutor's name. I just thought that was kind of amusing. Anyway, yes, she is giving closing arguments. Look at Hannah's appearance. She's dressed in all black, almost like she's like she's at a funeral. She's paying final respects to Helena. And her mother is actually in court. I just want to show you a quick picture of her before we get going. I think this is her. Her name's Stacy Reed. That's this image here. And that is how she reacted right after the verdict. I did notice some sort of injuries on her hand, on her hands. I just wondered what that was all about. So anyway, we are going to look at her reaction in a bit more detail, but let's kind of get going.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May it please the court, counsel. I want to begin by thanking you all for your time. I know that this has been a long trial, and I also understand that as jurors, you find yourselves maybe a little frustrated. There's a lot of sitting around and waiting, and we appreciate your time. We appreciate the sacrifice that you make when you leave your jobs and your families and your other responsibilities, and you come to court to participate in a very, very important part of our justice system. So on behalf of the state of New Mexico, We thank you very much for your time. And as you can see on your screens, we end exactly where we began, in the pursuit of justice for Helena Hutchins. I want to start by just generally outlining Hannah Guiterrez failed to maintain firearms safety, making a fatal accident willful and foreseeable.
So I know when I covered the Rust incident, there were a lot of people who said, I don't know why you've been covering this. It's not a crime. Crime wasn't committed. A crime can be committed by not doing something, right? By an act of omission, which is basically not an act, right? And we seem to be dealing with, or we may be dealing with something similar with Boeing, where they were supposed to do something that they didn't do. And so, did we see something like that here? Where Hannah was supposed to do something and she didn't do it. You're going to hear the prosecutor say it's a very important point, that it wasn't that she just made one mistake. It wasn't just a single, because all of us can make a mistake. That doesn't mean you were willful or that the negligence is serious, because we can all be distracted, we can all make mistakes, but when it's of a systemic nature, then it really is serious. And then when an accident happens, it's really not an accident, it's inevitable, right?
And please keep in mind that omissions can also be willful. So if we fail to do something that we should do, and that failure results in someone's death, then that too can be willful. So I would ask that you keep that in mind as we move through some of the evidence and testimony that you have heard. I know that you have heard a lot, and I do not intend to keep you too long, but I do have to be thorough. I do want to hit some high points. So I do appreciate your patience.
So she's about to get started here, and I do want to draw a comparison between this trial and the prosecutors, right? And the Troconis trial and the prosecutors, and then also the defense attorney. I would say, well, how can I put this? You guys know what the verdict is, right? How would you say the defense attorney in this case did compare to the defense attorney in that case? I mean, did the jury agree with anything that the defense attorney said in the Troconis trial compared to did the jury agree with anything this attorney said? What's the other important thing? The other thing that's so interesting between the two trials is how fast this trial moved, and there wasn't a murder. There were far more cogs in the wheel. I mean, the production was much bigger. So it's not to say that the Rust case was a lot simpler. If anything, it wasn't. But it's just interesting how fast-paced one trial can be. And I don't think the jury deliberated very long in this case, and how slow-paced another case can be. But of course, the fabric of the Troconis case was far more difficult to, what is going on in someone's mind, far more difficult to, like, how do you show that there was a conspiracy to commit a particular crime, especially when you haven't found the person's body. So it's really interesting how just the pacing of the two cases were different, right?
Here's what we saw. These videos, if you recall, that were taken by Production Outfitters, they were taken on October 13th of 2021. What these demonstrate to you is that Ms. Guiterrez was unwilling to maintain proper firearm safety repeatedly. And it's really important because this is not a case where Hannah Guiterrez made one mistake, and that one mistake was accidentally putting a live round into that gun. That's not what this case is about. This case is about constant, never-ending safety failures that resulted in the death of a human being and nearly killed another. So let's.
And I must say that if there's a quotable section out of her closing, you've just heard it. Constant mistakes. Another thing that I thought was very good about this closing argument is her use of visuals. I still don't understand when I sit in a trial, when it is the 21st century, when we've got all of this technology at our disposal, when you've got screens, why are you describing something to us when we can just see it? And a picture is 1,000 words, and it's a lot more powerful than anything you can say. Show us, don't tell us. And this is exactly what she did. Certainly in a trial that is about where a movie was being shot, you really don't have any excuse if you don't show this footage. You've got it, use it, right? And that is certainly a weakness I still see in lawyers who need to be more like journalists, right? There's a lot of narrative in the law, but you need to think of it like often our journalists do, not necessarily just writing journalists, but photojournalists and documentarians, that kind of thing. And so you're going to see right now her showing images of literally the constant failures, pointing a rifle at somebody, pointing a rifle even at her own face, right?
Talk about all of the safety failures that we saw, and the reason that these safety failures prior to October 21st are so critically important to the analysis is because they go to foreseeability. And foreseeability is a very important element in this case. So as we can see here, we have our stuntman with his double barrel shotgun. From watching those videos, what you understood is that Ms. Guiterrez did appear to, in fact, be present, because at times we saw her and at times we heard her. So she wasn't off doing prop duties. She was right there and she never intervened. Gun pointed at a child. Gun pointed at Joel Souza directly at his back. Gun pointed up in the air in the direction of the stunt coordinator. Gun pointed again, apparently in the...
So I don't know if you can see, there is I know when I looked at this, I was trying to see where the gun is over here, but it's there over there, pointed at, I don't know if that's Joel Souza, but you can see it's pointing in his direction.
Direction of Mr. Souza, the person on the far right. Gun pointed directly at Mr. Souza again.
I think that's it over there.
The firearm in the left hand of the stuntman who is facing you. Firearm pointed directly at a minor child. Firearm pointed directly at the camera. Ms. Guiterrez, holding that same firearm with the muzzle pointed at her own face.
Now, I have to say, there's a part of me that wonders why you needed a 10-day trial and why you couldn't have had a 1-day trial. In other words, opening statements, you show those photos. There you can see it. and then you basically show following that the what do you call it, the role of the armorer through industry professionals, right? And then maybe some people on set saying, yes, I saw it, some more footage. And do you really need to make any more of a case beyond just one day? And then closing arguments, show the photos again. There it is. But of course, the jury need to be aware of what happened inside the church to Alina. And there's also the question of the live rounds, although that wasn't really part of the charges. The whole thing of what is it? Evidence tampering didn't have to do with the live rounds. If that had been part of the trial, I think that would have um, made it worthy of certainly 10 days. But that certainly is a question that has come up. How did the live round get on set? I actually think I read that a jury member was interviewed subsequently who said, we believe, meaning the jury, we believe that Hannah was responsible for the live round coming on set, which I think is a reasonable, if not provable, point.
This was
Look at that.
unexpected. Ms. Gutierrez stood by and did nothing in between scenes when that stuntman, who had certainly been sent the message that he could do whatever he wanted with those guns, no one was going to intervene. The person tasked with intervening was not going to do it. That was clear. He hands the firearm to the child and allows the child to manipulate the gun before then, after a short period of time, perhaps thinking better of it and taking the gun back. This firearm, I actually don't think in this photo that the firearm is pointed at the child. I think the firearm is, based on the angle of the camera, probably more pointed at this person right here. But she's there. We hear her, we see her. She does nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is some of the first evidence that we see where if something doesn't stop, if something doesn't change, she is moving in the direction of potentially a fatal incident, and that is exactly what happened. And I want you to recall Ms. Gutierrez's interview on November 9th when Ms. Gutierrez spoke of the accidental discharge with the other stuntman, having a complete lack of understanding of her role in safety on this movie set. She's talking about Sarah Zachary, and she was like, well, yours just went off in there after you loaded it. And I said, yeah, well, I can't be responsible for every dickhead fucking stunt guy that gets a hold of the gun and doesn't understand the concept that it's hot. Her entire job is to be responsible for exactly that. Mm. And when she took this job, she agreed to that responsibility. There is no exception in the law for you're young. The exception in the law does not exist. The law treats everyone the same, and it must. What was the point to the testimony about the lever action rifle? Well, here's the point to the testimony about the lever action rifle. More negligence, more carelessness, more lack of attention to safety. She loaded a lever action rifle with dummy rounds that, by the way, according to the director, was completely unnecessary. because
So do you notice in the background, and this is not the first time, Hannah is whispering observations or something to her lawyer. And I don't know about you, but I kind of find it distracting. And isn't that perhaps the point? Is that, I mean, these are closing arguments. They've already heard everything the states had to say. They've seen all of the state's evidence. But you kind of get the idea that this is theater, where while the prosecutor is making her case, it's like, actually, she doesn't know about that, and you need to make a point of that, whatever. Um, it kind of distracts you from the message that she's making. And again, I wonder whether that's not a tactic. Everything tends to be choreographed in a case like this. What they're wearing, the whole dress code, who sits where. What's also very interesting to observe is through a lot of this trial, you might remember in the very first few days, you could see Hannah behind the prosecutor. So the court TV camera was here, the prosecutor was there, but you could still see Hannah kind of behind the camera. And then there was a period where you couldn't see Hannah, where Hannah was basically blocked by the prosecutor because they discovered that if she sat there, you couldn't see her. And guess what? Right now, you can see Hannah not objecting, but basically making comments about the what the prosecutor is saying. And do you think that that's not deliberate?
yes, while it's true, this gun operates in a way where if a certain type of camera.
So I don't know if you caught what I said. There was a period like right there, you can see that you can't see Hannah, right? Like right in that frame that you see there, you can't actually see her. And so it's only when she leans forward, I guess, when she wants to be seen, then she is seen. But I don't know if you're following what I'm trying to get at. And so I think she does want to be seen, and I think she does want to seem like what this person's saying is not true, or it's not accurate, or there's another side to the story. And her lawyers looks like he's making notes, right?
Angle is hitting it. Dummy rounds would be appropriate if the scene calls for loading or cycling. There wasn't a scene that called for that.
There she does it again.
So she just loaded a lever action rifle with dummy rounds and surprisingly put the wrong caliber round in the gun. That is absolutely an example of someone who is not paying attention, not taking their job seriously.
Sloppy.
I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the rounds that you've seen because it's critical to tracking the existence of the live rounds on this movie set. And we have spent a lot of time and effort tracking those rounds around that movie set, and we're going to show you that evidence right now. So the important thing to know is that the Seth Kenney dummies, which you are looking at right here, are patinaed. They are distinct. They have an antique coloring. They also have silver primers. These rounds did not come on that movie set until October 12th of 2021 because Mr. Kenney didn't have them. And if you recall his testimony, he was in Texas. So he had to get back, clean them up, and provide them to Sarah Zachary. And that took place on October 12th. This is just simply the primer side of those rounds. You can see that they're dark in color on the primer side, and they do appear to have silver primers. This is a photograph of the 3840 dummies. If you recall Mr. Kenney's testimony, the 3840 dummies came from Billy Ray. And the important thing about this photograph is that none of those dummy rounds had silver primers. And silver primer is a very important piece of this puzzle.
So someone said, I think Gimchi said, did anyone figure out who brought the live rounds on the set? I don't know if you're following the closing arguments. Basically, that it couldn't have come from Seth Kenny, and then there was another supplier, Billy Ray, and that they're saying that couldn't have come from him either. Well, who does that leave?
This is those same rounds on their side. You can see that they are shiny brass. We also know that they have brass primers. We just saw that. Based on Mr. Kenny's testimony, you know that they were 3840, but there was also some 4440
That's right.
caliber rounds in that box.
Now, what Francesca says that's really so true is, you really got a education on the whole protocol in making a gun safe, and that was so abundantly clear. And I'm going to show you another witness that brought this into the courtroom, that even the judge said, wow, you're waving this firearm around, but you haven't made it safe. And it's exactly that kind of insight that everybody needs to have around firearms. Not where you say, it's not my job to make a job safe, or it's got nothing to do with me. It's actually everybody's job. As soon as a firearm is, what's the word, visible or evident, you want to make sure, because it's something that can kill a person, you want to make sure that it is handled correctly. And in the John Barnett case, when they found him with his hand on the trigger, the first thing they did wasn't take his pulse. The first thing they did wasn't take crime scene photos. The first thing that they did wasn't take fingerprints of the vehicle. The very first thing they did was remove the firearm from his hand. I don't know whether they made it safe, checked it for ammunition, but that was kind of a safety thing, right? And as you say, Francesca, we learned not only about ammunition, but also firearm safety.
Does that monitor not working? Well, let's stop.
Now, I have to say it's crazy that in the middle of her closing arguments, there's a guy at the defense table doing whatever he's doing. Someone actually got up early and kind of walked around. That kind of thing, you shouldn't have that at all. There should be 100% full focus on the prosecutor. And, you do kind of get the sense that New Mexico is a smaller constituency. Things are a little, I don't want to say less serious, but anyway, so she basically asked them to stop for the monitor to be fixed, and now it seems to be fixed.
Let's take a moment to talk about all this testimony that you've heard about whether or not the live rounds found at PDQ, which are photographed there on the left, match the live rounds found on the set of Rust. You don't have to be a gun expert to look at those and see they simply do not match. Even though you could look at those rounds and fundamentally understand that they are not the same, the the sheriff's department sent them to the FBI for testing so that we could actually have some experts confirm what we can see with our very own eyes. And what you have in evidence, if you want to see them in real time, You have States Exhibit 79. You have States Exhibit 91. States Exhibit 79 is a disassembled live round from PDQ props. States Exhibit 79 is a disassembled live round from the set of Rust. You can look at them. You can see the projectiles are different. You can see that perhaps the primers are even different. If you recall, Ms. Popple indicated there were only 10 silver primered live rounds found at PDQ. The rest of them.
So I just want to respond to something Stephanie said. If Dave Halls didn't get immunity, do you think he would be on trial as well? Now, it's also quite interesting. In the Troconis trial, it's not over. I think Kent Mawhinney has still got to stand trial, right? So it's kind of like three people seem to be involved in the murder of Jennifer Doulos. Fotis, Michelle Troconis, and Kent Mawhinney. So you couldn't have a trial for Fotis because he died. There was a trial for Jennifer, and now there's going to be one, as far as I know, for Kent Mawhinney. In this case, you could easily have had three trials as well. One for Hannah, one for Dave Halls, and one for Alec Baldwin. Do you guys agree?
No more brass. The other thing that you can just see with your eyes is the gunpowder in these is substantially different. It has a different chemical composition. So any argument that could ever be made in this case that Seth Kinney was the source of these live rounds is absolutely dishonest.
Now, of course, that was Hannah's argument, and I guess the defense's argument was, where did the live rounds come from? Well, not from me, from Seth Kinney. And the defense went to quite a lot of effort to show how disorganized PDQ Propanarm was, which it definitely was disorganized. And certainly one kind of, and remember, Hannah was in a way recommended by PDQ Propanarm. That was kind of how Hannah got into the Rust production, via a recommendation from PDQ Propanarm. And so where did she learn to organize herself or not, right?
I'm going to ask you to take a walk in the weeds with me here.
Maybe that's an unfair thing to say. I mean, is it an unfair thing to say? Hannah, if you don't have your rounds organized very well, but you nevertheless know to check rounds, and you do that in a careful and systematic way, does it matter how disorganized everything else is? I would argue that it does matter. It does matter that your I don't want to call it logistics, but just the way you inventory your, like your system of inventory. If you think about Hannah, she had a fanny pack. Things just seemed all over the place. There were rounds mixed all over the place. That is a recipe for a live round to move through that system. On the other hand, where you have an inventory where all rounds are of the same type. So number one, they check. Number two, they are not only checked, but they are identified and sort of collected together. All of that is going to make sure that you kind of have a careful system that is not going to allow a round to kind of go through that system, right? And it does feel like there was just a lot of sloppiness from the one end to the other end, right?
Okay. This is a photograph of October 10th of 2021. You can see the color of the rounds at the top. Those are brass primered rounds. The rounds in the bottom appear to be lighter, and I would suggest to you, based on the totality of the evidence that we're going to go through, that you are looking at live rounds. And keep in mind, anything that you see on the set of this movie that is a revolver ammunition, prior to October 12th, if it has a silver primer, it's a live round.
Mm-hmm.
Because the silver primered dummies didn't come on set for 2 days after this photograph was taken. Here's our comparison photo that Mr. Primo put together for us. And if you need it when you're reviewing the evidence and doing your deliberations or engaging in your deliberations, I have included it for you. But we're going to do a comparison here in a moment. Now, the importance of this photograph, still October 10th of 2021. There appears to be revolver ammunition in the background there at the top. 2 of those have silver primers. The problem with that is the silver primer dummies weren't there yet. But the live rounds were. And there's your close-up. It's absolutely undeniable. Is it blurry? Yes. Can you clearly see the difference? Absolutely.
So that one clearly is silver. That one looks like it might be. I'm not sure about those 2. Whoa.
All of these photos that you're looking at were October 10th. Now, let's move to October 13th of 2021. I invite you to look at that photograph carefully and ask yourselves, which of these is not like the others? It's the 3rd one from the left.
That one. Because it's rounded, right?
Look at the shape of that projectile and look at the color of the brass. So on October 13th, Mr. Kenny's dummies have arrived on set. They are the only dummy rounds with silver primers, but they are patinaed in color. So when you look at this round, it appears to be a spot-on match for the live rounds, but unfortunately we can't see the primer in this photo, so we can't tell if this is a brass primered dummy. That's the reason that we watched thousands of videos and looked at thousands of pictures, because then we moved to the production outfitter videos from October 13th, the same day, and we're looking at that same gun holster that was provided to Mr. Baldwin. And there you see it. The 3rd one down has a silver primer.
That one.
And now you know it is a live round. You know that because it's not a Seth Kinney dummy. If it were, it wouldn't have that shiny brass color. So there's your live round. We've seen it on October 10th. We've seen it on October 13th. And there's absolutely no way that the lighting is playing tricks on our eyes when we're looking at these enhanced photos, because you see it frame after frame after frame.
So, sorry, I just want to go back just slightly.
If it were, it wouldn't have that shiny brass color. So there's your live round. We've seen it on October 10th. We've seen it on October 13th. And there's absolutely no way that the lighting is playing tricks on our eyes when we're looking at these enhanced photos, because you see it frame after frame after frame.
So I just wanted to emphasize that it's this one over here, right? That one over there. And I have to say, if I may, that I can't tell you how often I've gone through the exact same thing. I'm writing a book and I'm looking for something. I'm looking for one specific photo that I know exists. Sometimes I'm looking for something that I assume exists or expect exists, but it's the same thing. You basically are looking for something because you're telling a story and you've gone along a particular thread, if I can put it that way, and now in order to, because I try to source all of my information in order to reinforce what you're saying, in order to prove what you're saying, you trying to find the image so that you can hyperlink it to the narrative. And then what literally happens is you can spend sometimes an entire day and sometimes even longer, 2 days, 3 days, even a week, literally searching for one thing. And sometimes, usually, I find it. Um, but what is incredible during this process of looking for, in this targeted sort of psychology, where you're searching for something specific, it forces you to kind of have an archive at your disposal of all the information, all the footage, all the photos, and you certainly become an expert in your search for this specific thing that you're looking for. And while you're searching for that one thing, you stumble upon other things that take you in all sorts of other directions, but also expand your general knowledge to way beyond the expert level. And so I've often found, when you ask yourself, okay, I'm looking for, in the John Benet Ramsey case, I'm looking for, trying to think of a good example, photos of Burke Ramsey's, the second bed in Burke Ramsey's bedroom. It's not an image that's very easy to find. It's very, very kind of rare. And in the process of going through hundreds and then thousands, or maybe 1,000 images, you find all sorts of other things that you either didn't know about or forgot about, or something like that. And including, you might find cans of soda in a wash basin. What is the significance of that? And so on and so on. All I'm trying to say is, in this effort to, and she said this herself, in this effort to show you this particular live run, that there's no doubt. She didn't just show you one instance of it. She showed you, I think, three, and she may be showing you another one. She's really going the extra mile. Guess what? You get to know this footage inside out. Look at this.
And now let's move to October 15th.
There's Hannah over there, Alec Baldwin over there. I think that is Joel Souza, the director, quite a small fellow. There's Dave Halls. There's the young child actor. I'm not sure who that is. Any guesses? I'm not sure if that's Sarah Zachary. I don't think her hair's blonde enough, but that seems to be Hannah with a bandolier in her hand.
Karen Kuhn arrives on set. I think she was probably there long before the 15th. She is taking photos. She took approximately, as she testified, 9,000 photos.
Wow.
So on the 15th,
you see it over there? And that's Hannah standing over there with the torn jeans.
there it is. There's your silver primer. It's just been moved to a different location in the holster because they're pulling dummy rounds from here, there, and everywhere and putting them in belts and putting them in guns and doing whatever they want to do. But there it is. It's right there on October 15th. And if you think I'm stretching it, let's have a look at what we've got here. This is the gun belt that was assigned to actor Jensen Ackles. Because his gun belt was not a shoulder holster, we weren't able to find any photos or videos of it in the thousands and thousands and thousands that we reviewed, because they're always covered by his coat.
And you may remember, am I right in saying that I don't think any of the well-known actors, like whatsoever, testified in this trial, right? I don't think Jensen Ackles did, or did he? Don't think so. Don't remember that. I don't think I can't remember his name, but it's the guy who acted in Vikings. I don't think he testified. The little boy didn't testify. Alec Baldwin, of course, didn't testify. I'm just trying to think, did any actors testify in this trial that appeared in Rust? I'm just trying to think. I don't seem to remember. And so one does wonder. By the way, I did post a short video of Jensen Ackles. I think he was being interviewed by law enforcement, basically saying he has his own system for checking, and it's quite simple. He just points the gun at the ground and fires 5, 6 shots, I guess 6 shots, and then that's it. It takes him 6 seconds, 5, 6 seconds. And he says the armorers don't really like that because it can wear down the trigger or something. And he says he doesn't care. He's made sure it's safe. And, it's a kind of a simple, common sense 5-second thing. And that's what he does. And so there's video of him. It's on my channel, of him saying that. One does wonder, in Alec Baldwin's trial, how many actors are going to be testifying and on whose side are they going to be on. And one can imagine, I wouldn't be surprised if you have many folks on the acting side and on the production side testifying in support of Alec Baldwin. I wouldn't be surprised. Deborah says, I don't think any actors testified. So that is kind of interesting, isn't it? That you kind of only had crew testifying. One does wonder, did the prosecution purposefully hold back that side of it for the next trial? By the way, Alec Baldwin has applied for his case to be dismissed. It hasn't been dismissed.
There is the evidence photo of the Baldwin holster.
Hi, Christine.
On October 21st, when it is taken into evidence. You have a Seth Kinney dummy at the top. You have what the FBI.
So how he makes, when I say how he makes it safe, well, someone has given him the firearm, and it's basically he just fires 6 times at the ground, and you would assume, obviously it's not the best system, but it's better than no system whatsoever. You would assume that if there's a live round, then it would have gone off. So that's the answer.
FBI determined to be a live round in the second spot, and then you've got 3 brass primered dummies. October 17th, October 21st.
So there it is. I think there are 2 over here. I'm not sure if that's one, but that looks like 2. There it is again. There it is again. Those are 2 live rounds side by side.
So the video that Mamie Mitchell laid the foundation for, she said that according to her notes, the filming was done on the 17th. Mr. Primo said that he believed, according to the camera, it was the 18th. Take whatever date you want. That's a match. Seth Kinney dummy at the top, live round next. You've got 3 brass primer dummies on the 21st, 4 brass primer dummies on the 17th or 18th. But it is shockingly the same. And there is no question that this one right here is a live round. It was sent to the FBI and they confirmed it. This is Ms. Guiterrez talking about.
So another similarity between the Troconis trial and this trial is where the defendant's own words basically convict them. I mean, a big part of the state's case in the Troconis trial was playing at length Troconis's testimony and then basically saying how she'd contradicted herself. Well, here you have Hannah also making statements that are basically damning.
Her bringing these dummy rounds on set. I had a multitude of the ones with holes and the ones that you shake, so yeah. And I checked those all and I put them into two things. And then we start talking about boxes. Obviously, when she says things, she's talking about boxes. They usually had JS on them.
So there she says, "This is one that my dad sent me."
This is one my dad sent me, and mine are usually beat up pretty bad, like they're very dirty and gross. She's talking about the box and the styrofoam insert. The box and the styrofoam insert, she's saying, are dirty. Hers, the ones that she brings on set, are dirty. They're not new and clean like some of the other ones. Detective Hancock asks her, this is the one that was or handed that you guys had said that you had pulled from. This is that moment in that interview where Ms. Guiterrez has already shown Hancock the photo from her dad, and an hour or two later, Detective Hancock decides that now is the time to show her the photo of the box of dummies she was pulling from that day, and it won't surprise you to learn they're a spot-on match. You have the styrofoam insert from that box of dummies here in evidence, and the reason that we gave it to you so that you can actually look at it in real time and not look at a photograph is because it's kind of dirty and gross. It kind of fits exactly the way that she described it. But there are some characteristics of this styrofoam insert that are going to become more important. Any suggestion by the defense that somehow the box of dummy...
So I just want to respond to what Deborah said. You know, I agree with that. And that not only that she incriminated herself in these quotes, but she did say repeatedly on camera, you know, I've just effed up my career. You know what I mean? She said that to quite a few people. And why was she so convinced? Why was she so convinced that she had effed up her career? Wasn't that guilty knowledge?
Rounds that Ms. Guiterrez said she was pulling from was swapped out with something different is absolute nonsense. First of all, you know that because you can see the live rounds. If you don't think you can see them on the 10th, and you don't think you can see them on the 13th, and you...
So let's just have a look at that. There is the box on the prop cart. I think that is I think that's a revolver over there. I can't see the fanny pack. But this is certainly an image we haven't seen before, right? I think that was the ammunition box that the officer put into his cruiser, wasn't it?
You don't think you can see him on the 15th? You know you're looking at one on the 17th and 18th. You know you are. So where does the sabotage theory go then? The 17th and 18th, the camera crew hadn't quit yet. Mr. Norvell wasn't on set poking around on the prop cart. Mr. Halls hadn't had an opportunity to spend any time with the gun. They moved directly from that cart right into Lieutenant Benavidez's patrol unit.
I must say that was good police work. You know, if he didn't do that as soon as he did and as direct as he did, just that could have compromised this case.
They go from that patrol unit right into evidence at the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department. And on November 9th of 2021, Hannah Guiterrez shows Detective Hancock, now Corporal Hancock, the box of dummies that she and her dad have. And if you listen to Mr. Kenny's testimony, what you understand is that the ammunition from the previous set, that being the old way, Hannah brought leftover dummies from that movie onto the set of Rust. And those 45 long Colt dummy rounds were provided by Guiterrez-Reed,
who I think is actually in court on this day. And, you know, it does actually make you think. It's kind of a strange thought experiment. If Hannah's dad, and I guess it is her stepfather, but if Hannah's dad wasn't Guiterrez-Reed, if Hannah had simply been trained in some other way, you know, I don't know if she would have had live rounds at home. I don't know if she would have had this resource of other bullets and other ammunition. And so you do sort of wonder if you took that component out of the whole equation, if there could have been, I'm not saying that excuses Hannah and that Hannah, I'm not saying that Hannah's innocent. I'm just saying if you took that component out, that would perhaps limit the access of live rounds onto the set. And so I wonder how Guiterrez-Reed feels about this whole thing, this legendary armorer who it seems like the live round came from Hannah, but where did Hannah get it? You know, you get what I'm saying.
What you are looking at in this photo is this styrofoam insert. This is the styrofoam insert that had the live round in it. This is the styrofoam insert that came out of the box labeled 45 long Colt dummies with the JS in the middle. Now,
thanks for being with us, Stephanie. Take care.
Let's put it together.
Good to see you, even though it was a little bit brief. Good luck with your son's contest, right?
Our original evidence photo up here from October 10th. You can see this distinct sort of cut in the styrofoam on that insert that is sitting on her leg on the 10th.
Stephanie, before you go, just to let you know, I'll be putting up a video on the Team Petrie channel about the dunes, the very high dunes of the Namib. Just in terms of photography and scenery, that'll probably be a really nice video to watch. So look out for that one. Anyway, good luck, and we'll see you guys. We'll see you next time. We'll see you, Guy, next time. Okay. Take care.
You can see that the hole in the styrofoam in the second to the right at the top is dirty. You can see a little bit of grime. You can see it right there. And you're going to take it into evidence and you can look at it closer. you're going to see that there's some damage to the styrofoam separators between these two holes. And what do you know? It's right there. There's a little bit of damage to the styrofoam separators down here. You can see it in the photo on the right. You can look for yourself. It is right here. And what do you know? That silver primered round from October 10th is sitting in the exact same position that it was found on October 21st when the Sheriff's Department collected this box, took it into evidence, and photographed it. Ladies and gentlemen, we call that circumstantial evidence, but that's a mountain of circumstantial evidence. Prop assistant duties versus armor duties on October 21st of 2021. Let's focus on that day. And listen, I'm not here to tell you that Rust Productions did the right thing when they hired on a part-time armorer and asked her to also spend her time doing props. I think everybody who has testified has said that was a really bad idea. Mm-hmm. And that's probably part of the reason that they're being sued by a whole bunch of different people.
Yeah.
But on October 21st, this was...
Yeah, I think the kind of error in thinking is some people will say, how can you blame Hannah because of X, Y, Z? But that doesn't make Hannah innocent. By the same token, if you say Hannah's guilty, that doesn't mean the production were doing things the right way, or even the management or the culture on set was right. So it's not really a case of if Hannah's guilty, the production's innocent, or if the production's guilty, Hannah's innocent. It's kind of, isn't it a combination of both? It's not either or, it's a bit of both. But it was Hannah's responsibility to do something. Did she do her job, right? And although it's not the actor's job to check the firearm, I'm talking about Alec Baldwin. Well, Alec Baldwin wasn't just the actor; he was also the producer. He was also setting the tone for the entire production, which we've seen many times in the footage. And that was something I knew and intuited without seeing any footage. That he's the kind of forceful personality that probably would do that. And so we saw certainly evidence on camera in this case showing Alec Baldwin setting the tone. I was saying that before any of that footage came out.
Simply not the case. It was not the case on that day. She had 3 hours in the morning waiting for the camera crew to arrive. She had every opportunity to go through that box of dummies. That only had like 30 rounds in it. How long does it take to pull the round out of the box, shake it, and if it doesn't shake, look to see if it has a hole in it, put it back in the box, and do that to each and every one of them? How long does that exercise take? 10 minutes max? That's not hard. The other thing that is very important is Ms. Guiterrez didn't get pulled out of the church because she had to go focus on prop duties. She left the gun in the church contrary to all the industry standards for armors on movie sets, for firearm safety on movie sets. And she went back out to her cart so that she could start doing other armor duties.
That's also a very good point. You can't really argue that, and this is on the day of the shooting, and I mean, it's of the incident. I mean, it's certainly an argument you can make on other days, but on the day of the incident, was she being drawn away because of other non-armorer duties? And the answer is no.
Getting her fanny pack filled up. Well, we've seen that. She's filling it with blanks. And we know they're about to do a turnaround. They're going to do this.
So I don't know if she's going to read this. I give it to Dave, the firearm, and I step outside. Why do I step outside the church? Because we're about to start shooting. And I don't know, I think that means actual shooting, not the camera shooting. And I was getting like all my stuff ready. Anyway, let's go to that.
This quick insert with Baldwin, and then they're going to do the shoot scene, the gunfire scene where they're using blanks, and the law enforcement have come into the church, and there's a shootout. So she goes to get ready for it. She just leaves the gun in there. As you heard from many witnesses, she would leave guns unattended all the time. There was nothing unusual about October 21st that caused her to be unable to stay in the church to properly perform her duties. She leaves the gun. She goes back out because for some reason, with the 3 hours of free time that she had in the morning, she didn't get her fanny pack filled up. She didn't get herself ready for that turnaround. So she leaves the gun. Everybody's heard.
So what I'm trying to show you guys, the narrative that I'm trying to put out there is the exact same scenario with Rust is possibly taking place with Boeing, which is if you have these constant safety protocol violations, if it's constant, then you're going to have an inevitable situation where airplanes fall out the sky. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, you literally are seeing almost on a daily basis a plane nosediving for 10 seconds and over here, over there, another panel flies off a plane. You almost at a state now where you're constantly hearing about incidents, right? And that is no surprise if you have the protocol that is there to protect lives simply being treated as a nuisance, I guess. Then guess what's going to happen? The inevitable is going to happen. And it is far more serious when it comes to Boeing because how many lives on each airplane? So this exact same thing where you're looking at the Rust scenario where you say, wow, that is what can happen when you just don't pay attention to industry standards when it comes to safety. Well, what's going to happen is exactly what did happen, right? And now you apply that to Boeing, and guess what's going to happen? And you almost seem to have a similar thing. People trying to protect the production so that they can make money, and they just don't seem to get the message. They just don't seem to get the message. How well are you going to protect the production if somebody else gets killed and another person? The way to protect the production is by following safety protocols.
Armorers don't leave the gun. Now, let's move over to our tampering with evidence charge. How is getting rid of a bag of cocaine tampering with evidence related to?
So I don't know how many of you here watched the video I last did on Boeing. Did you guys know that they have spoken about people on the production line that are on cocaine, people on the production line that are basically under the influence, on the production line under the influence? So again, you have this parallel universe to this case where you might say that Hannah was sloppy, careless, whatever. But what if all of that was not exaggerated, aggravated by something like a hangover or something like a headache? I think she apparently said on the day of the incident that she had a splitting headache. Well, from what? And if she didn't have a splitting headache, could that have changed things? The same thing if you're on a Boeing production line, and you are not compos mentis, so much more is it going to create failures and omissions, isn't it?
To involuntary manslaughter. Well, on October 21st, 2021, the shooting occurs, the incident occurs. Ms. Guiterrez understands that someone has been seriously injured. She does not yet know that that person is not going to live or has already died. She gets interviewed at the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. I will say, surprisingly, 2 occasions after this incident where a helicopter had to come in, ambulances had to come in. Ms. Guiterrez, on 2 occasions after that incident, spoke about her concerns about her career. Wow. That gives you an idea that you are dealing with someone who is not particularly concerned about the health and safety of others.
So thanks very much, Earth and Susan. Yeah, no, that's true. I don't know whether she'll be allowed to, but you may have noticed during my coverage of this case, something that frankly surprised me was that even when they showed, and even when she was in court looking at, and I mean, we couldn't actually see it, but looking at Helena and what was going on in the church and the attempts to stabilize her and the attempts to save her, right? She does not shed one tear. And when you go to the incident and the body cam, she does seem to, I don't know if she is crying, but she does seem distressed. But all of that distress is for herself. She doesn't seem to shed one tear, even in the interview subsequent. Bear in mind, Helena ends up dying. She doesn't, when that comes up, shed one tear. I feel like, I honestly feel like I've shown more sympathy in my life for trees that have been cut down, for like when I went on a recent trip, there were about 2 or 3 occasions where a bird just from nowhere flew in front of the vehicle and you went over it. I think I've showed more concern or felt more concern than she's showed. That's just my impression. Isn't that your impression that she has almost a psychopathic awareness of what has happened? She doesn't seem to care about Helena. Her first response is, "What about me? What about my career?"
And her job was to be concerned about the health and safety of others. But on that day,
and if you think about it, your job is to be concerned about the health and safety of others. And then when someone is shot, you're concerned about your own career. Doesn't that tell you everything? Is this the right person for this job? You know?
she's just thinking about herself. She's put a lady in the hospital, a man in the hospital. She asks to be escorted to the bathroom. Corporal Hancock agrees to do that. And we have her on video on the way there expressing dismay about how this will affect her career. Ouch.
So it's not as though she's completely unemotional. She is emotional. It's not as though she's not affected by this. She is affected by this. The shocking thing is she's affected by it in terms of how she thinks it's going to affect herself. And I've got to say, like, how can I put this? Yeah, you have a person in a situation where whether they think that they did something wrong or not, um, you kind of got to ask yourself, what what would it take for someone to break down and really be reached and touched by the pain and suffering of another person, if not this? You know, if this is not going to, you see the person in the video bleeding, crying out in pain, in agony, and she later dies. You in court, you don't show any emotion. If that's not going to touch you and affect you, where you realize, well, that's happened to another person. What is, right? And I don't know whether she's sitting there thinking, you know, if I cry, is that going to look like I'm guilty? But I think a lot of people, like you saw, Dave Halls and other people, literally men breaking down kind of on the stand, and Hannah doesn't. Hannah didn't even testify in her own defense, which I think also speaks volumes. Michelle Troconis didn't either, which I think speaks volumes. So what I'm trying to say is, would this have happened, and could this have happened if someone was, for the lack of a better word, just a normal person with normal feelings of sensitivity to their fellow man or woman, right? I often think, and it's one of the reasons I just try not to completely avoid any criminal case. A lot of cases do involve substance abuse anyway. There even is a suggestion that Patsy, from the housekeeper, that Patsy drank a little bit of alcohol, perhaps more than she should have. But so there's a little bit of substance abuse in all cases. But I try and steer completely clear of cases involving drug addicts or drugs, because it's just so obvious what happens. People who are addicts simply don't give a shit about anybody else around them. People who are addicts tend to be, they tend to become psychopaths, because it's almost like such a high level of narcissism in addiction, where you're always thinking about yourself, where it's all about how you feel, that you simply are incapable of thinking about how somebody else feels. And I'm just not interested in talking about a case that's like that. It's simple. It's because of the drugs. There's no advanced psychology that's at play there. It's simply that tawdry tale of I want to feel nice kind of thing. And I don't know whether that's a factor in the Koberger case. Um, it certainly looks like it's part of the backstory to that case. Is some of that part of the foreground? I don't know. I don't know whether he cleaned up his act. But what I'm trying to say, like with Hannah, is do you think cocaine use, if she used cocaine, substance abuse if she did, because I don't think it was proved in this trial, but if it was a factor, do you think that it could have helped Helena in any way? Do you think if there were any of those substances part of the narrative, whether distantly part of it, like, or indirectly part of it, you think it helped Helena in any way?
After the interview, Hannah goes back to her hotel. Rebecca Smith goes to Hannah's room. She's been summoned by some other folks to try to sort of sit and visit and give Hannah some support. So Rebecca Smith goes to her room, and Rebecca Smith is the person that tells Hannah that Helena Hutchins has now died. And you have to understand, in the mind of Hannah Guiterrez, this investigation went from this big to this big. Because the difference between shooting someone and them living and shooting someone and them dying is a really, really big difference. So she is told by Rebecca Smith, investigation just got giant and very, very serious. So after receiving that information,
Even there in court, when the prosecutor is saying that, you kind of get a sense of I don't know if the word's nonchalance, but you kind of get a sense of not giving a fuck, even in that thing, just from her expression. Um, I don't know. It's hard to say why that's how it appears. Um, is that how it appears to you?
She offloads this bag of cocaine to Rebecca Smith. Rebecca Smith is a lady that's lived a life. She's used cocaine before, many years previous, but she's used cocaine. She knows what it looks like. She knows how it's packaged. And because she's a former addict, she tosses it in a trash can. When Mr. Bowles gets up here and says, I can't prove to you that it's cocaine, remember that when people destroy evidence to avoid prosecution, you don't have the evidence that they destroyed. They got rid of it. So I don't have to prove to you by some scientific drug test. I don't have to send that to the lab and get it tested. It's gone. That's the point to the charge.
I do you guys agree with that? What she just said? She says, I don't have to, the point of it was that she got rid of it. I don't have to prove it. I don't need a drug test. Do you guys agree with that? Yvonne says it's a form of self-defense at this moment of exposure. I don't know about that. She's been very composed throughout, including when she was questioned by law enforcement. Yeah, I really agree with that. She does seem mildly annoyed, like this is really a waste of my time. So, as far as I'm concerned, and I mean, the state failed to prove their case in terms of the evidence tampering and the cocaine baggie. Um, if they had that test, if they did that test, if they did toxicology, if they had a positive result, then I think they would have gotten a conviction on that score. That was a failure on their part. Um, I don't know whether they, as far as I know, they just didn't test her. But, she had fairly long hair, long enough where you'd think, although I must say, in photos not taken very long after the incident, Hannah's hair was no longer purple and yellow, it was brown. I'm talking about very, very shortly after that. I'm not sure if it was cut, but it was certainly colored differently. I'm not sure if that would affect toxicology. One must also ask the question: why did it take? Why was the toxicology not done? And you've kind of got to ask yourself: did Sarah Zachary come? Did because who would have known about that aspect? And I would imagine Sarah Zachary would have known about it. Bear in mind, we can look back and almost assume that everything was known at the time, but it took a long time to piece things together and to figure things out. There was a long time where they didn't even know whether they were going to prosecute this case. That's how long it took to kind of put the pieces together. What I'm trying to get at is, as far as I know, Sarah Zachary also made a deal with the state. And if Sarah Zachary had communicated early on her suspicions, her observations, that could have led to a toxicology test when it could have been useful. Does that make sense?
Now, let me.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, how can I put this? It doesn't matter what you're addicted to. If you're addicted to coffee is maybe a bad example. I'm trying to think of other addictions. If you're addicted to, substances, a lot of your, let's say you're addicted to soapies, or you're addicted to um, uh, binge watching movies constantly, or you're just addicted to looking at your phone. That's quite a good example. If you're addicted to your phone and you're constantly looking at your phone, you are not very different from a psychopath, because your ability to consider others and to consider what else is going on around you is not really there. It's non-existent. So anyone who's addicted is caught up in a self perpetuating cycle that doesn't really allow them to be a human being, and doesn't allow them to be a human being to their fellow human beings, right? Your addiction basically is a self reinforcing mechanism. And so you are just feeding yourself, and essentially feeding yourself is feeding that addiction, which is not very different from being a psychopath. And so even if someone is addicted to Facebook, or addicted to Instagram, or addicted to taking selfies, it's not that different to being a psychopath. Think about someone who's on their phone driving, right? They're driving, but they're still on their phone, and they just can't leave their phone alone. They can't stop looking at their phone. That's a very dangerous individual. Very, very dangerous individual. Do you follow?
I digress a little bit and run through a couple of things with you. What's all this testimony about this inertia puller? And how does that play into everything? Well, as you heard from Mr. Haig, an inertia puller is a device designed for one task. It disassembles live rounds. That's what it does. Somehow I think the defense got confused about what our potential theory was, that we had a theory that Ms. Guiterrez was turning dummy rounds into live rounds. That was never our theory, because that would require quite a bit of equipment. There's no question. But to do the reverse.
Now, I must say, hold on, what did she say? Turning dummy live rounds into live rounds. I must say that was certainly something that I considered. Not that Hannah did it, but possibly that her father did it, that her father converted dummy rounds into live rounds. Why? Because it's cheaper. And I think one of the armorers actually mentioned it. And Hannah also said how expensive these rounds are, right? And quite rare, because there was a lot of people, I guess, shooting westerns or something. They were struggling to get hold of these 45 long Colt rounds, right? And so certainly the live rounds, one could cheaply make them by getting the dummy rounds and doing that. And that was certainly something that I considered may have come from Thel Reed, and may have been something that he did, because you would imagine that something that is unique to an armorer, that armorers in their own private time probably would do something like that, is basically reverse engineer dummy round into a live round for their own personal use, for their own personal fun. And by the way, some people can get kind of high, can get a kick out of shooting live rounds. There are a lot of people who shoot for enjoyment and for what's the word, entertainment. And you can imagine the armorer type folks perhaps cater to those folks as well, when they're not working in their official capacity.
Is a whole lot easier. So if you're out of dummy rounds, or you're running low on dummy rounds and you've got some live rounds around, you could probably turn a dummy round, you could
Hey,
turn
Matt,
a
good
live
to
round
see you.
into a dummy round in 5 minutes.
I'm trying to look at this. There's a wheelchair here. I'm trying to look for Thel Reed in this. So also what is quite nice about this trial was not only could we see the defendant's face, we got quite a few different camera angles, and that made this trial really different to cover than the Troconis trial, right?
Why does an armorer on a movie set bill for an inertia puller? Well, obviously she had one. Now, let's talk about the OSHA investigation. OSHA doesn't find any wrongdoing with individual employees, only employers. That's their job. They're just an agency that maintains workplace safety. Mr. Genoway confirmed when he was on the witness stand, it's true, his memory was a little bad and Mr. Lewis had to refresh it for him, but he confirmed that Hannah's conduct on the set contributed to their findings that this was not a safe workplace. Please keep in mind that the OSHA investigation is not a criminal investigation. Critically and surprisingly, OSHA never interviewed Gabrielle Pickle. This is critically important because if they had interviewed her, they would have known the following things. Hannah was granted 10 armorer days out of the 12 filming days, not 8. That was right there in the cell phone records. The training days, when Ms. Guiterrez is sending those messages saying, I want more training time, training days. She's not saying these actors, these adults need more training time. She specifically requested additional training time to train the child. And it was refused because, first of all, it's a major liability issue. And second of all, the child was never going to fire a gun. So when she asked for the additional training days, they were denied. That's not the...
So if you think about it, she's still thinking about her career. I mean, think about it. She wants training days with a kid. If he's never going to fire anything, why does he need it? Good point.
The reason Helena Hutchins is dead? Keep in mind, Gabrielle Pickle had a meeting with Hannah and offered her additional assistance so that she would be able to perform her duties effectively. She offered assistance from some of the other folks there on set to try to give her some relief. And keep in mind that on a movie set, the armorer has autonomy with regard to...
So I just want to respond to what Deborah says. I can understand how you feel. I was in the Air Force, and I also got military training with live rounds on what do you call it? I did target practice, and I've got to say, based on all the things that we had to do, we had to erect tents, we had to, do basic training. We had to learn how to type, although I could type, because I was part of the mobile communications unit. We had to learn to operate radios. We had to learn to drive trucks. Probably what I enjoyed the most was, the weapons training and the weapons handling. It was interesting and it was fun. You did feel, obviously it's not just you getting the training, there's dozens of kids running around, and some of them don't point the gun to the ground, and you sort of feel pretty nervous that there could just be one kid who, because you've been given pretty deadly weapons. I mean, these are automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons. Someone could make a mistake, and then that's it for you. I'm talking about someone who's never ever handled a firearm is now given a firearm. And so although it was really interesting, it certainly, you would need to be quite vigilant.
To gun safety. The OSHA finding that Rust Productions failed to properly supervise her is surprisingly incorrect, because the armorer has no supervisor when it comes to weapons and gun safety on the movie set. Mr. Halls is just there to be a second pair of eyes. That's it. Now,
so that's a good question. Why wasn't she drug tested? I would say because by the time they knew that she should be, it was too late. That's my understanding.
I think there can be no question that Rust Productions was more than negligent when they hired Ms. Guiterrez, because she was not anywhere close to being qualified for this job.
I would tend to agree with that. For a production that was so there was so many firearms and so much firearm activity, you would want an experienced armorer, right? And that is initially what they try to get, but they actually tried to get a guy called Rasmussen, as far as I can remember, but he wanted a single role, and I think he was charging quite a lot of money, and so like in that respect, I do think Hannah was badly suited to the role. The other thing, and I think you can see this from a mile away, is I mean, we can say this in hindsight, if you see Hannah and the kind of person she is, and the way that she was dealing with work, and the sort of sloppiness that's kind of going on, you see that, and you look at Alec Baldwin, this very forceful personality, this very excitable kind of character, and you put them together, you can kind of imagine how um, things are going to play out. Someone who's sort of going with the flow, and then also someone who is a forceful personality. Just those two characters together. Is it so hard to imagine a different outcome?
In fact, if you recall, Gabrielle Pickle, to her credit, tried to get Ms. Guiterrez to implement a check-in and check-out system because 2 people had complained.
If you look at the footage and you sort of imagine Hannah doing her job, it's quite hard to imagine, because it's a big set. I think there were like 200 crew. But what I'm trying to say is, you imagine this 24-year-old with purple and yellow hair trying to, you know, control the set. It would be, you can almost imagine that it would be quite difficult for that to happen. Whereas if you had that armorer dude who testified, the guy who said, I would just kill everything. I would just say, that's the end. You know, we're not going to do anything until this is resolved. And if you want to fire me, but we're not going to do this. You need that kind of strong, controlling, conscientious personality on the set, right? And Hannah wasn't that person.
That there was a shotgun left unattended. People on the set were complaining about her. They went to production and said, hey, she's not supposed to do that. You can't just leave real guns laying around. So Gabrielle Pickle goes to Hannah Guiterrez, asks for a check-in, check-out system. Hannah Guiterrez says no. Hannah Guiterrez says it's too difficult, it's too much trouble. Gabrielle Pickle didn't prevent her from being safe. In that instance, she did the opposite. She tried to improve firearm safety on the set, but keep in mind, the armor has autonomy. So Gabrielle Pickle is not Hannah Gutierrez's boss when it comes to firearm safety. Ms. Gutierrez gets to do what she wants. Now I can only imagine that
I don't really agree with that. I don't think the reality was that Hannah could do as she wanted, because I mean she was told that she needs to do more prop days. I think there is a certain truth that Hannah was doing to some extent as she wanted, but you kind of got the feeling that she was intimidated by some of the crew around her, don't you?
after this chain of cases, all of that.
I mean, when the whole thing happened and the cops came on the scene, and the guy said, "Okay, where's the revolver?" And I think he said, "Where's the cart?" You sort of got a sense of Hannah not breaking down, but basically falling to pieces. Um, and you can imagine that kind of level of intimidation, feeling intimidated, happening elsewhere on the set if she was rushed too much or whatever. And you see some of that correspondence with Seth Kenny, just that she even said, I'm gonna walk away from this if they keep complaining. You get the sense that she's to some extent overwhelmed, right?
Will change. So the defense has taken a shotgun approach to this case. Seth Kinney is to blame. Well, no evidence of that. Sarah Zachary is to blame. No evidence of that. Dave Halls is to blame. He shouldn't have taken the gun from her, and he didn't do a good safety check. Well, she is the autonomous decision maker with regard to gun safety. It's not that Dave Halls shouldn't have taken the gun from her. It's that she shouldn't have given him the gun and then turned around and walked away. The defense. Alec Baldwin is to blame for acting like a prima donna on the movie set and bossing people around. This is Hollywood, for heaven's sakes. I would imagine that's relatively common. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that his conduct was right. I am the person who indicted him. Alec Baldwin's conduct and his lack of gun safety inside that church on that day is something that he's going to have to answer for. Not with you and not today.
Yeah.
That'll be with another jury on another day.
And I mean, that was true in terms of the defense. The defense pointing a finger at Alec Baldwin was true, but it's not really getting to the heart of the matter, is it?
Brian Norvell, the gentleman who goes and gets the prop cart and wheels it over and then puts his hand over the crime scene tape and picks up that dummy round and shakes it. You heard Mr. Bowles ask some questions that are intended to make people think that Mr. Norvell either took something off the prop cart or planted something on the prop cart. Well, keep in mind, he doesn't have to plant live rounds because we've seen from the photographic evidence, those are there. They're floating around already. So live rounds were on set. They were not planted by Brian Norvell. But this man is not a mystery to the state or the defense.
I just want to respond to that answer. Yes. Alec Baldwin's trial is in July this year.
I made him come in and sit down for a 1.5-hour interview so that the defense could ask him any questions they wanted, and they asked him none. Not a single question. So what that means is that this is just all smoke and mirrors and deflection. They don't want the truth. We know the truth. You have seen it throughout this trial. And
Thanks
I
a
will
lot,
remind you
Fredicus.
that
Appreciate
during
it.
one of the heated objection exchanges between myself and Mr. Bowles, you heard Mr. Bowles cry out that he was looking for the truth. Listen, I can bring a horse to water, but I cannot make him drink. If you want the truth, I'll bring the guy in. I'll make him available for you to talk to. Ask him some questions. Not a single one. It must have been that disgruntled camera crew. You mean the people who believed that safety on set was being compromised to such a degree that they left?
Such a great point. Really? So the camera crew that were leaving because of safety are going to violate that safety? That's why they're leaving.
That decision may very well have saved their lives.
Yeah.
So the $60,000 question in this case, who brought the live rounds on set? You know the answer to that. I know the answer to that. I'm not telling you that Hannah Guiterrez intended to bring live rounds on set. I'm telling you that she was negligent, she was careless, she was thoughtless. She brought them on set, and you know from the testimony you heard, Sarah Zachary never saw her shake a dummy round. Dave Halls never saw her shake a dummy round.
Oh, that is shocking, isn't it?
She didn't shake those dummy rounds. For all we know, those dummy rounds were floating around the set of The Old Way, and Nicolas Cage is lucky to have walked away with his life.
Tim, you've got a point. I mean, that was a big issue. And by the way, I've actually driven a lot of that route. So I've driven not like from Albuquerque itself, but along the road between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And I was at the end of a long drive coming in from Texas. And I felt the length of that drive. And like driving that road and just thinking, wow, you'd have to do this twice a day, essentially 4 times, driving from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, there and back. And then, so it's kind of like twice a day. So not twice a day, twice in one day, would be asking a lot. And especially at the beginning of the day before the sun comes up, and at the end of the day when the sun comes down, goes down. But I do think it wasn't just that distance. There had been some serious problems, and I think they were right about how serious those problems were. Look at what ultimately happened. But I do think that was certainly maybe 60% of the reason they did quit.
So why does it matter that she brought live rounds on set? It goes to foreseeability. She had six live rounds on that movie set. The earliest date that I can track them for you is October 10th. We know that they were there from the 10th to the 21st. 6, and she failed to ferret them out for 12 days.
Now, if you think about that, there's 6 live rounds on set, and you don't find any of them, apparently. Then doesn't that suggest you literally are doing zero checking? You kind of just assumed all of these are dummies, and my job isn't to check for live rounds, but simply just to put dummies in and right? It is pretty shocking.
What that means is that she wasn't shaking any dummy rounds. She wasn't testing anything.
True.
None of that stuff that her lawyers want you to think was so difficult. None of it was happening. It didn't happen the entire time. She didn't find any of them. And folks, if she's not checking the dummy ammunition during the pendency of the filming to make sure that those rounds that are designed to look like live rounds are in fact dummy rounds, this was a game of Russian roulette.
Yeah.
Every time an actor had a gun with dummies. Sadly, for
So that is really a really good way of putting it. This was basically Russian roulette. I don't know whether probably nobody knew that they were actually playing Russian roulette, but it was basically Russian roulette with fate, and fate played its hand, and Helena lost her life. It was inevitable. Like if you play Russian roulette often enough, and there were 6 live rounds, if Helena didn't die, possibly somebody else would have. If Helena didn't die when she was shot, probably the actors that were facing Alec Baldwin would have been shot. The actors coming into the church. By the way, the prosecutors just used a word that I haven't seen very much: pendency.
Pendency.
What does it mean? It means state of condition of being pending or awaiting settlement. Just quite interesting to know.
Pendency.
That word. Yeah.
Pendency.
Ms. Hutchins, her camera crew walked off set that morning, and that required her to go into the church and operate the camera herself. And that's what she was doing when the live round that Ms. Guiterrez put in Mr. Baldwin's gun was expelled from that firearm and went all the way through her body.
Matt Prince says, I didn't know there were 6 live rounds. As far as I know, there were actually 8. I think it's 6 plus the one that killed Helena. As far as I remember, there were actually 8 live rounds.
No one told Ms. Guiterrez to leave the church. No one called her out of the church. There wasn't a COVID protocol in place that prevented her from being in the church at that moment. You know from the production outfitter videos, she didn't care about her job. She let it all go. Mr. Bowles is going to argue to you that if Mr. Halls had just called Ms. Guiterrez back into the church, she would have done an additional safety check, and that live round.
It's actually really kind of, like being a bit of a hypocrite to say, like you don't care about gun protocol, and then you say, no, just because of COVID protocol that I wasn't allowed in set. When you can imagine, let me ask you a question. If Hannah had a particular attitude towards gun safety, what do you think her attitude, just it's like it's speculation, but what do you think her attitude would have been to COVID, right? Let me say that again. If Hannah had a particular attitude to gun safety, do you think she would have had a similar attitude to COVID? And now suddenly it's like, well, okay, I wasn't allowed in the church because of COVID protocols. Well, there were still 14 people in that church, I believe, 14 people in the church. And so she's saying that they have established that was never an issue. And in a lot of the footage, you see people milling around. One person's got a mask on, whatever.
would have been found, well, for heaven's sakes. We all know that if she had been called back into the church for an additional safety check, nothing would have changed. Her safety checks didn't consist of pulling the dummy rounds out of the cylinder, shaking them in front of the actor and the assistant director, showing them that they're dummy rounds, and putting them back in. No one ever saw her do that one single time, even though that's industry standard. And the reason it's industry standard is because you can't tell a dummy round by simply spinning a cylinder and looking at the primers unless they are dummy rounds without primers. And that's kind of an interesting fact.
Cheers,
We
Earth.
know
Thanks for joining us.
that 6 dummy rounds without primers were not loaded into that weapon because one of them turned out to be live and very clearly had a primer. Interestingly, though, she had 5 dummy rounds without primers in her pocket. In her pocket. All she had to do was put those in the gun, make sure that the 6th one either rattles or has a hole in it, and she's good to go. Because now, when the cylinder gets spun, you can see 5 of them without taking them out, that they don't have primers. They were in her pocket, and she didn't use them.
Hello,
I am going to
Aristocat.
have
Good to have you
another
here.
opportunity to speak with you, and when I speak with you last, it won't be as long, I promise. And we will talk about some of our jury instructions then. But I do want to address some of the testimony from Dr. Gerald from OMI, because Mr. Bowles is likely to make an argument that there was some sort of medical negligence that contributed to Ms. Hutchins' death. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Dr. Gerald's testimony.
In other words, she's saying that the defense may argue that Helena wouldn't have died because of the gunshot injury. She died because of some kind of error in treating her. As far as I know, they put a tube through her esophagus, which was kind of an error, unfortunately.
Here are the lethal injuries. The lethal injuries: blood loss from the wound. That was the primary lethal injury. Her blood was leaking into her abdominal cavity.
This is also a very good point. No one was calling her out for not doing her job other than the camera crew that walked off. And even that was sort of indirect. But you're right. No one, and so who should have been calling her out for that? In a way, everybody. But anyway.
And a lot of it. And you saw those photographs. You saw the photographs of her clothing. There was a lot of blood. So the first lethal injury that comes from the gunshot is blood loss associated with it. And the second one, if you recall from Dr. Gerald, the wound to the lung was also a lethal wound. Keep in mind, that bullet went into her body, it went through her rib, it severed her spinal cord, it punctured her lung, it came out the back of her shoulder, and a few hours later, Ms. Guiterrez is telling Corporal Hancock that she's worried about her career. If you think that person would have done a satisfactory safety check if she had been called back to the church, I am here to tell you that I strongly disagree.
You've said it correctly, Deborah. That's it.
The astonishing lack of diligence with regard to gun safety is, without question, a significant cause of the death of Helena Hutchins. Did Mr. Baldwin also contribute when he pointed the gun at people and pulled the hammer back, and regardless of what he said to George Stephanopoulos, pulled the trigger? Yes, he is. And again, we'll deal with that another time. You don't escape accountability when you load a live round into a prop gun, tell the crew that it has dummy rounds in it, hand it off to an actor, and leave the room because he manipulated it. That's the whole point. That was the whole point to him having it. Of course he was going to manipulate it. It's foreseeable. Everything is so completely foreseeable. Imagine I hand you a gun and I tell you that it's basically empty and I walk away when in fact, I put live ammunition in it. You think an accident might happen? You think that accident is foreseeable? And listen, let's remember some of the testimony from Mr. Carpenter.
I can't help thinking that Baldwin could use that argument against the prosecution, meaning he could say, you know what, I was told that it was a cold gun, so I was allowed to do whatever I wanted to with it, right? I don't think that's true, though. I don't think the protocol does allow you, even if you do have a cold gun, you're still not supposed to point it at anyone. But a jury might say, well, that's understandable. You know, you were told something, and so why wouldn't it have been harmless?
Control is how we enforce gun safety. We do it with control. When she loses control, which she did repeatedly, anything goes. Anything goes there. I am going to complete the majority of the portion of my closing arguments with regard to the facts. The next portion will be with regard to the law. When I come back after Mr. Bowles has had an opportunity to address you, we will be asking for justice today for Helena Hutchins. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to play the defense's defense, but it is 4 o'clock in the morning where I am, and I can't really afford to be up like for too long. What I want to do now is, let's just see if I can. What I want to do now is play you a little bit of the defense witness. See if I can find it here. The defense witness, I think, shooting their case in the foot. It's this moment over here. It's this guy.
To movies yet, but your experience with firearms and period firearms and how you obtain that familiarity.
Do you wish for the long explanation or the short?
So this was the defense witness on day 9, the day before the verdict. So one of their last witnesses.
No, the short. The short's always better.
My father was a combat MP in the Second World War. I was shooting almost from birth. I was sent to rifle camp in Butte, Montana at age 6, which is hard to imagine. I grew up around a hunting family. My grandfather was a big-time hunter. I grew up hunting deer and pheasants with my uncle in the forests of Ohio. I had Ohio and Indiana and Pennsylvania hunting licenses ever since they were required.
So this is the moment it starts taking place. I think. So now he's been given firearms, and now he's going to do a demonstration. Where's the volume? Hold on.
The weapon.
That's okay. But I want to ask you, in the course of that, and you've had a whole lifetime, is that fair to say?
Yes, it is.
Of gun. Have you been a collector also of period type weapons?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. Are you familiar with the revolver in this case, the 45 long Colt?
Absolutely.
Did you bring with you today that revolver? Not that revolver, but a revolver just like that revolver?
Yes, we would call it a sister. It is made by Pieta, the same exact company with nearly sequential serial numbers. It is absolutely identical. Any part would interchange, and it will look exactly like the Baldwin gun.
Did you also bring a replica gun with you?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell the jury just first of all what
Sure.
that is?
This is a Denex replica. Denex is a company in Spain that makes replicas of anything from shotguns to antique weapons to swords, things like that. They're used by reenactors. They're used in movies. There was a Denex revolver on the set of Rust that was used as one of the dummy guns. There were, in fact, 10 non-firing replica guns on the set that looked like this. So it can't shoot, but it looks like it. It functions, it cocks, the cylinder turns, and from 5 feet away, you couldn't tell unless you really looked.
Okay, sir. Let me, if I can. Yes, I was going to ask at this time, Your Honor, if I could tender him as an expert in the categories I previously did.
Well, why don't you state them on the record again?
I was making sure I had the exact wording. Is that okay if you wrote those down? Because I don't want to change it. Well, I'll just say it again. It's firearm identification, firearm functioning, reloading of ammunition, and identification of ammunition, of dummy rounds and live rounds.
Any objection?
No objection within the confines of what we discussed at the bench.
All right, thank you.
Yes, I understand. So, sir, if you will, I'm sorry.
For these specific areas, subject to the ruling up at the bench. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. Sir, if you will, if you could, however the deputy handles this, but if you could retrieve your firearms from behind you.
Do it in public, and I will clarify that it is not loaded. Okay? The first is a real.
Mr. Kuski, are you able to take the cylinder out so you can show everyone also that it's unloaded?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Something important. And here is a Denex revolver.
So, Your Honor, I'm going to object.
All right, first of all, everybody's nervous because you have not demonstrated to us that they're unloaded. So before you start showing us the weapons, make sure they're unloaded, including that one that you just touched.
So can you see how the judge, I don't know whether she would have done this otherwise, maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't, but you can kind of see how this court has been educated on gun safety and how fast on the draw the judge was to say, well, you need to show us that it's safe. And so this is a really low point. Literally the defense shooting itself, not literally, but almost the defense shooting itself in the foot. And a moment later, this guy would, in an effort to show that the gun was safe, he points the gun at the judge. So quite a few gaffes, which basically made the state's case in a couple of moments. This is a big disaster for the defense. Look, he's going to point it now at the judge. Look at that. And so that kind of made headlines like this one. Sorry, not that one, this one. Where is it? Expert witness points gun at judge. This is from the Telegraph.
Clarify that it is.
It's what you've just seen.
It's a real
Mr. Kuski, are you able to take the cylinder out?
can.
Okay.
So, Your Honor, I'm going to object.
All right, first of all, everybody's nervous because you have not demonstrated to us that they are unloaded. So before you start showing us the weapons, make sure they're unloaded, including that one that you just touched.
And watch this. It's ridiculous. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to show you guys that. We're not going to go any further through his testimony. I mean, that was really like actions speak louder than words. I do want to play you guys the verdict. We've already been here a while. Let's just see if I can. I'd really like to play the rest of the closing arguments. I just want to see how long they go on for. Let's go over here. Just want to see how long this closing is going to be. I just want to play a little bit of the rebuttal and then we'll go to the verdict.
Hannah didn't know there was a live round on set. I agree. If Hannah knew there was a live round on set and she loaded it into a prop gun and it was used to kill Helena Hutchins, she wouldn't be charged with involuntary manslaughter. She'd be charged with second-degree murder. She'd be charged with first-degree depraved mind murder. This is an involuntary manslaughter charge because she didn't know there were live rounds on set, and the reason she didn't know was through her own negligence, her own recklessness, her own willful disregard for the safety of other people. That willful disregard, that lack of care for the safety of other people that you have seen throughout this trial. It is shocking. For Mr. Bowles to come up to this podium and say it wasn't foreseeable that Alec Baldwin was going to go off script and pull the hammer and pull the trigger. He showed you a video of Alec Baldwin going off script. Alec Baldwin went off script. Hannah Guiterrez knew it. She was there. Hannah Guiterrez knew that Baldwin was loose. She knew it. She didn't do anything about it, even though it was her job. It was her job. It is her job to say to an A-list actor, if in fact that's what you want to call him, hey, you can't behave that way with those firearms. That is her job. That is what they pay her for. That is the job that she applied for. That is the job that she accepted. Foreseeability. You want to talk about off script? Just remember those videos of the stuntman. That's
Hmm.
not within the script. She was there. She watched it. She knew these people would go off script. You know she didn't check the rounds. If she checked the rounds, they wouldn't have been floating around that movie set the entire time.
Okay, so let's go to the very end of it.
2, I will now ask you to retire to the jury room to begin your deliberations. You will be provided a copy of the jury instructions, and the exhibits introduced as evidence will be made available to you. Prior to beginning your deliberations, you will need to select one of you to act as foreperson. That person will preside over your deliberations and will speak for the jury here in court.
Now, what's quite interesting is even during this
Forms of verdict have been prepared.
this phase, so day 10, I didn't see her mother here. Her mother sat sort of over here. Her mother only seemed to come in, unless I'm wrong, for the verdict, and Thal Reed as well. Do you guys understand it that way as well?
Prepared for your use. You will take these forms to the jury room. When you have reached a unanimous agreement as to your verdict, the foreperson will sign the forms which express your verdict. You will then return all forms of verdict, these instructions, and any exhibits to the courtroom. There are 12 that deliberate. There are 4 alternates on this jury, given the long length of this jury. Keeping with the privacy, I'm going to pass this instruction.
So if you look at this view of the gallery, I don't see her mother there, and I don't see Thal Reed there. It's quite interesting how the prosecutor is looking at the jury. It is quite interesting just that her own parents didn't really have her back during the trial, just the very end of it.
Down with the help of Ryan, you're going to look if this is one of your names, and you are one of the alternates. What I'm going to ask the bailiffs to do is to first take the alternates out so they can get their belongings.
That's right.
And I'm going to ask you to meet me down at the end of the hallway to explain. I hate to tell alternates they're alternates because they've been paying so close to the evidence. And so just to talk with you, and then and thank you. And then right along on your clip will be the jurors themselves. Okay, and the jurors will go into the room. So I'll need the aid of both of them. But first, let me pass this piece of paper over to you. Look down here. There's 4 names. See if one of them is yours and you're an alternate.
Not sure why she's on camera. And thanks to the wonders of the internet, we're going to skip the whole period where the jury were deliberating. Just watch Hannah being excused. And obviously, sentencing awaits.
All right, we're in recess. I'll be back in, but we're in recess. You can get going with your exhibits and things like that.
Is Hannah going to be sentenced to 6 months, a year? Is she actually going to go to prison at all? I guess we'll see. Okay, so let's jump to the verdict. I think it is, Terry.
Thoughts about how to respond?
I'm not going, I'm just going to tell him to,
Just
we,
keep-
yeah,
keep doing it.
we can't help him.
That's right.
Just gonna tell him to.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You know, it is such a tragedy. It's not just that Helena lost her life, her son lost his mother, her husband lost a wife. Hannah also, I won't say she loses her life, but she certainly loses a portion of it. A young person, um, you know, certainly her career, I think, is ruined. Um, and you know, it's caused quite a lot of damage to many people. We'll see whether Alec Baldwin suffers some damage as well. Okay, so that's, oh, so that's not the end of the verdict watch. So what I found very interesting, I've obviously have watched it before. Maybe some of you have as well. Baldwin's trial is in July, Helena. What I found really interesting was how her mother was so emotional, and Hannah's been emotionless this whole time. Her mother was not only very emotional, but over emotional. Her mother was even sort of seemed to be shouting at the court as she left, which was quite astonishing. And so you've got, on the one hand, Hannah, who is extremely emotionless, and her mother who's extremely sort of over emotional. And the other thing that was strange is that that Hannah didn't seem to um, interact with her mother. She didn't seem to. She seemed almost to be ignoring the fact that her mother was there. She didn't seem to there doesn't seem to be any communication between her and her mother, which makes you kind of wonder what is going on or was going on between mother and daughter, not just recently, but what was the nature of their mother daughter relationship. Okay, let's go forward a little bit further. Um, I think I caught a glimpse of her there. Yeah, I'm not. I don't think Thal Reed is her biological father to stepfather, but he was present. Who her biological father is, I'm not sure. So her mother's still not in court. Here she comes, I think. There's Hannah. Her mother is besides her one attorney. There she is, got blonde hair. So there, she does kind of turn to her mother. I don't know whether these are relatives. I don't know whether it's a brother, but she's certainly not sitting next to Thal Reed, right? Her mother also looks surprisingly sort of older than you'd imagine. There, her mother's all smiles. looks a little bit anxious. Well said, Donald. It's about really breaking safety protocols. Now, if you look at this part of her shoulder, you can see there's like a thin sliver of light brown. And it's a way that you can tell how, although she doesn't seem to be showing emotion, I think she is actually breathing in a quite a nervous way. And so if she is breathing, you'll notice the rise and fall of the shoulder in relation to this line. Let's see if we can see it.
All right, so let me repeat. I said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, through the foreperson, have you reached a verdict?
Yes.
All right, and do you wish to read the verdicts?
Sure.
Okay, I would start with count one. Okay.
So again, take a look here and see whether it looks like she's breathing. She doesn't appear to be emotional, but is she breathing quite deeply? And I can assure you she is feeling something for herself. So whether she's showing it or not, she definitely is feeling something. All of us would be. You know, if a verdict is about to be read, whether you're guilty or not, a lot is riding on it. And of course, you're in a public setting, you are going to be nervous, you are going to be anxious.
Both of them. Will the defendant please stand?
Can you see your mother's face there? Let's just go back
We find the
slightly.
defendant, Hannah Guiterrez.
Look at her mother's face here.
We find the defendant, Hannah Guiterrez, guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Can you see her shoulder is rising? Can you see?
All right, so let me repeat. I said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, through the foreperson, have you reached a verdict?
Yes.
All right, and do you wish to read the verdicts?
Sure.
Okay, I would start with
So I want you to
count one.
keep an eye on her mother. Just
Okay,
she's over there, right?
both of them. Will the defendant please stand?
So mother's face over there. And there she kind of bows her head down. And you can tell that her mother is very bad at managing her emotions.
We find the defendant, Hannah Gutierrez, guilty of involuntary manslaughter as charged in count 1. We find the defendant, Hannah Gutierrez, not guilty
You can still see her chest is rising while these counts, even though her face is blank.
of tampering with evidence as charged in count 2.
All right, thank you.
Look at her mother's face here, and her mother's going to get more and more emotional as this goes on.
You may be seated. Let me get those forms, retrieve those forms from you. I'm going to do what's called polling the jury. What I need to put on the record is that this is your individual verdict, okay? So I'm going to start with the gentleman in the back. Is this your
Yeah,
verdict?
that's right.
Yes.
Ma'am, is this your verdict? Sir, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Sir, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Sir, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Sir, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Ma'am, is this your verdict? Ma'am, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Ma'am, is this your verdict?
Can you see she's saying no and shaking her head?
Ma'am, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Ma'am, is this your verdict? Okay, thank you. All right, so you've completed your service. Thank you so much for being here. It was a long trial.
Anyone know who this lady is? I've got no idea.
People may want to talk to you.
Now she's folding her arms, her mother. Again, you just see this strange amount of emotional intensity, obvious emotional intensity from her mother, whereas Hannah is still, even though Hannah's just received a verdict, she's blank.
This has been pretty much a lot of publicity, and you don't have to, okay? So you can just simply say, I do not wish to talk, and move on.
Now you'll see her mother gets progressively more and more upset as time goes by.
And if anybody bothers you, we really try to protect your privacy. If anybody bothers you, simply call my division, and we'll figure out what to do. But you also may talk, okay? So it's entirely up to you, okay? All right.
There, her mother actually looks like she's in tears already, right?
So
I don't. There's Thel Reed sitting over there, so he's not actually ostensible. He's not overtly even supporting Hannah's mother. So there seems to be a little bit of a distance between the two of them as well.
you can escort them out. All right. Thank you.
Now, what I want you to pay attention to here is Hannah's mother's upset. Does Hannah talk to her mother at all? Is there much warmth between mother and daughter? Obviously, her mother's upset, but does her mother reach out to her daughter, say anything? What actually happens?
All rise.
George, just a minute.
It looks like she's looking towards Thel Reed, doesn't it? And I would argue that her mother has shown more emotion in the last 2 minutes than Hannah showed during the entire trial. Yeah, as Pauline says, there's no backward glance. You can see how distressed her mother is, and Hannah, no sign of any distress. Certainly no obvious sign. Okay, so she's a good
All right,
friend
you
of
may be seated.
Alina. Thanks for that.
All right, is there anything that the state's requesting based upon the verdict?
Can you see her mother's gesturing? She's thrown her hands up in the air. She's looked towards Thel a couple of times.
Request that Ms. Gutierrez be taken into custody.
Mr. Bowles?
The prosecutor says we want Hannah to be taken into custody. Her mother kind of shakes her head.
Your Honor, we would request under, pull up the rule, Your Honor.
You see, again, their mother drops her head down. Her mother's overwhelmed with emotion. Look at the expression on her face. She's really pained. She's really heartbroken. We're seeing all sorts of emotions from her mother that are just completely absent with Hannah.
Your Honor, Rule 5402.
Look at her face. Even this brother looks to some extent quite emotional.
Release pending sentencing. In this court's discretion, under the same conditions or other conditions as this court would deem necessary.
What's also interesting is, I might be wrong, you might see it in a moment from now, but there doesn't seem to be any comforting. I don't know whether these are her brothers or her son or whoever, if it's family members, but there doesn't seem to be any attempt to comfort one another, put an arm around the person or say something. They, all three of them, although they're sitting together, each is on his own, it seems like.
Ms. Guiterrez has been on conditions. She has not violated those conditions. She has voluntarily appeared at all court.
That's not the point. The point is I'm trying to reveal or sort of explain the difference in just how emotional the mother is and how unemotional Hannah is, and how strange that is.
Proceedings. Your Honor, I would request this court to continue conditions or whatever conditions this court would have on release.
All right, thank you.
She's even got both hands on her face, kind of doing that. There's just a lot of emotion on show.
I'm going to remand you, and the reason why I'm going to remand you is you are now convicted. And so, and this is it.
So I don't know if you picked that up. The judge says you remanded, and it's because you've been convicted, and her mother kind of goes, what? It's almost like reality is too much for her mother. Her mother just cannot handle it.
Death. It's a criminal negligence, but it's still a death. And so, deputies, you're going to take her into custody, and we will set a sentencing date. What is the best,
So again, now you even see from this family member, surprise, I guess they didn't expect this. I do agree with what some of you are saying, that maybe Hannah just thought, well, I'll just appeal and so I can go home.
we want to look like on that? And we need an order of remand, do we? David?
And so a officer appears at the important moment to, I guess, escort Hannah out the court, but also to make sure there's not some kind of escalation from the gallery.
Counsel?
In terms of the sentencing date?
Yes.
At the court's convenience, will be available. There are 2 weeks in May that I'm unavailable.
Good to see you
These are the
here,
last 2
Liesl.
weeks of May.
All right. Mr. Bowles?
Your Honor, as soon as this court has time, we will be available.
All right, so, do you have any conflict like that? She said May. Do you have any conflict?
Okay, so there you do see him comforting her. So, yeah, that is good to see.
I don't know for sure, Your Honor, that I could. I do have other trials, but I think mid-May.
Well, I can do it sooner.
Okay.
I just wondered if you had any conflicts along the way.
Doesn't look like mid-May, Your Honor. I do. I don't think I have any conflicts.
I'm sorry, not understanding. Do you have, okay, we're in March, do you have,
It is interesting that Hannah was offered a plea deal and she didn't take it. That is quite interesting.
do you have time before May?
We have time in April.
Okay,
Sure.
all right, okay. All right, anything else before?
So again, you can see her mother's clearly distressed, and she's going to later on say something loudly to the court. But what I want you to look out for now is when Hannah stands up, does she actually say anything to her mother? Does her mother say anything to her?
Before the court?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, we're in recess. Deputy.
Does she even look at her mother? She's got her arms behind her back. I don't know if you saw her mother there throw her hands down kind of in anger. And Hannah just seems to glance that way and walk by. She could possibly have paused. Let me show that again.
You said May, do you have any conflict?
I don't know for sure, Your Honor, that I do have other trials, but I think mid-May.
Well, I can do it sooner.
Okay.
I just wondered if you had any conflicts along the way.
Doesn't look like mid-May, Your Honor. I do. I don't think I have any conflicts.
I'm sorry, not understanding. Do you have, okay, we're in March, do you have time before May?
We have time in April.
Okay,
Sure.
all right, okay. All right, anything else before the court?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, we're in recess.
So keep an eye on her mother, and when Hannah walks past her mother, does Hannah say anything? Does it seem a little bit cool? Does she seem a little bit cool towards her mother?
Deputy.
Is there any attempt from Hannah to really look at her mother or say anything? It's at that point that her mother throws her arms down on the front of the gallery woodwork. Hannah just seems to walk by her mother. We can't see her face, so it's a little bit hard to judge exactly what was going on there. So keep an eye on her mother over here. I think that is Guiterrez-Reed over there. Keep an eye on her mother as she walks out. I'm not quite sure who this man is. You can see her mother's walking really quickly. And there is some kind of gesture towards the court. I think that's Thal over there. She seems to basically ignore him.
All right, okay. All right, anything else before the court?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, we're in recess. Deputy.
She did also seem to look back briefly at her brother. So can you see, yes, Guiterrez-Reed over here, and he seems to be moving. I'm not sure if he's moving towards the attorney or to Hannah's mother, but Hannah's mother basically just ignores him. Watch Thal and watch her. he looks at Thel. She's still kind of on her way out. Walking quite quickly. This is Thel over here. And she's kind of muttering under her breath. Now she's almost facing Thel, and she's now going to kind of do an about turn and say something. I don't know what it was. She's still shouting or still calling out something. I don't know whether whatever she said was aimed at the defense attorneys or at the court or what. So now Thel is actually talking to the defense attorneys. That kind of makes sense. What is going to happen next? How did this happen? Whatever. But the thing that I want to sort of deal with is how good is the mother? Maybe it's unfair to say, but how good is the mother at accepting what has happened here and in a way taking responsibility? She hasn't attended trial. She was only there for the verdict. Has her mother managed her daughter in a way that is conscientious and consistent? Or is it a chaotic, emotionally kind of unstable kind of relationship? You can't quite see Thel's face from this angle. Now we can. Looks like he's got something, not sure what that's called. Is it I know on a woman it's a brooch, right? I'm not sure what that is, but looks like there's an emblem of 2 rifles on it. He also seems to be in disbelief, doesn't he? As far as I know, it was Thel Reed's. It came from Thel Reed, this idea that there could have been sabotage on the set. And that never really flew, did it? Bolo tie, okay. My personal opinion is, Thel Reed was supposed to be the ultimate instructor of Hannah. In other words, you got the idea that Hannah was who she was because of Thel Reed, that Hannah was who she was because Thel was this legend and he had all the expertise in the world and he knew exactly what to do and he conveyed that to Hannah, right? And I think the reality is one of 3 possibilities. The one is that maybe he did um, give a lot of his knowledge and to his daughter as a sort of a protege, that he did educate her and he did a good job. Maybe he did ultimately imbue Hannah with very important information. Maybe he did. And then you say, well, what happened? If he did that, why did things go wrong? one possible explanation is drugs, that the Hannah that he knew isn't the Hannah of the Rust set, that what interfered with her focus, her concentration, with who she was as a person, was possibly drugs. Another possibility is that um, he educated her very well, and that she simply just kind of grew up as a person and became someone who perhaps just didn't care that much about certain things. And then the third possibility is that maybe he didn't train her very well, that she was just like along for the ride, that she was on film sets with him. And while he was doing his job, she was just there, but she didn't necessarily receive proper training, right? That's also a possibility. But although he may not be legally responsible, and he certainly isn't legally responsible, you would imagine he would feel that there might be a sense of moral, right or wrong, there might be a sense of some moral responsibility as the parental figure. Now, if you look at what's happened here, her mother has stormed out of the room in a huff, and Thel has spent quite a long time trying to wrap his head against the situation. Look at the body language of this attorney. Diane, thanks for joining us. Thanks a lot for being here. Okay, so I'm not going to take it further than that. Obviously, this isn't the end. There's the sentencing hearing coming up probably within a month from now, and then also the Alec Baldwin trial. So it's certainly not over. Is Hannah going to appeal this case? I don't know. I don't know whether she will. Does she have grounds to appeal? I doubt it. But who knows? Who knows? If Baldwin wins his case, I think Hannah might have a, and if something emerges during Baldwin's trial, you'd imagine all the loopholes that there possibly are going to be exploited, and maybe that could have some legal merit. We'll see. Okay. Anyway, that is it from me. Thanks a lot for joining me. I really did want to just get some closure on this case. I covered it up until day 9, I think, but then it wasn't really up to me. I was traveling with a friend of mine, and we kind of had to coordinate our schedules, and things had to be booked in advance. So I really would have liked to have covered this. Unfortunately, where we went, there simply was no internet connection. So it wasn't that I didn't care and I wasn't conscientious. I simply was impossible to do. But we have come back and we have dealt with it. And I think it was an important final chapter to look at. And obviously, our thoughts do go to Helena. You can see her behind me. It really is a tragedy of what happened to her, and obviously not anything she deserved. But what she deserved even less was for people to say, oh, it was just an accident, let's move on. No one did anything wrong. No one is culpable. And you can see there was a heck of a lot of culpability on this set, not just from Hannah's side and not just from someone else's side, but to some extent with a lot of the crew members. And so hopefully, if anything, what happened to Helena can prevent the same kind of problems ever happening again. So hopefully the whole movie industry have learned a lesson. Thanks a lot, Christine. Appreciate it. And thanks a lot, Deborah. Appreciate that. Okay, so that's it from me. It's almost 5 o'clock in the morning here. I do need to skedaddle and get a little bit of sleep. I am human. So anyway, again, thanks for joining me. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot for being here, mods. Thank you.